Have you ever had negative thoughts in your mind that you aren't good enough, that you'll never be successful? If so, you're not alone. I've had those thoughts playing in my mind ever since I took the leap to become an entrepreneur. It's a dirty, dark secret that no one likes to talk about, as the glamorization of becoming an entrepreneur is shown in the media. I realized that in order to succeed, I needed help. We all do. So I decided to go all in on myself, spending thousands of hours in the trenches, reading, joining groups, listening to podcasts, hiring coaches to develop a bulletproof morning routine for success. Join me on my journey as together we build our morning fire to ignite our lives as entrepreneurs. My name is Jeff Wickersham, and this is the Morning Fire for Entrepreneurs podcast.
Welcome to the Morning Fire for Entrepreneurs podcast. I'm excited to have special guest on the show today, Jerry Fetta. Jerry is the CEO and founder of Wealth Dynamics. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be on.
Absolutely. So let's get into to state real quick. So I'm going to have you do 2 breaths in. We're going to breathe, raise our hands all the way up to the ceiling. So let's go ahead, breathe in and out. Good. Another breath in and out. Then I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1. We're going to yell boom at the top of our lungs, get some energy going in 3, 2, 1, and boom, boom.
All right.
Love it. Love it. Thanks for playing along. So let's get right into it. I eat, sleep, breathe, morning habits, routines, rituals. Jerry, what do you do in the morning that sets you down that path towards success?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, I like to take my dogs for a walk, and I'll usually, spend some time with them. And then I like to have coffee with my wife. And that's kind of my morning routine. It's evolved over time. So I've done a lot of, I used to wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning and work out and different things. And this is kind of my sweet spot is, getting all of that stuff done prior to starting my work.
Okay. And walking the dogs, what do you think that helps you with, right? Does that help you clear your mind for the day? What does that process kind of look like?
Yeah. So for me, it kind of keeps me playful before I get into the day. I have a tendency to get real serious when I get into work mode. So my dogs are goofballs. I go out, walk them, it kind of lightens the mood. It keeps me kind of light, playful, creative, and then I can get to it.
Yeah, I love that thought of being playful and creative. It snowed here back on the East Coast this past weekend, and my youngest son said, "Hey, can we have a family snowball fight?" So we had a family snowball fight, laughing, just acting like a kid, and that's so important to do every so often, right? Play like a kid, act like a kid again, and create that energy that comes with it for sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, where you started, where you're at now.
Yeah. So I've been in this industry as an entrepreneur for almost 10 years now. So I'm in the financial services sector, and basically I'm 28 now, but I started in business at the age of 18. And it definitely was it was a lot at once. When I first started in business, I didn't really have the intention of getting into business. That wasn't my plan growing up. So it was kind of, opportunity that I came into to start in this industry, and I kind of leapt for it and just ran with it. And probably for 3 or 4 years, I was terrible, just not sure where to put things, how to do things. And so there was a lot of, failing, going back to the beginning, going back to square one and that type of thing. And when I finally hit my stride, maybe 4 or 5 years into it, things just kind of clicked. And so we've been able to grow our company. My wife and I work together, which is a very fun part of my life, is being business partners with her. And so we work together. We work with our staff. We've got clients across the country now. And it's a lot of fun, especially in this day and age, being able to be so much online and doing things kind of on a cloud basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I loved hearing from you, and I love to hear from entrepreneurs, is for 4 to 5 years, you weren't very good, right? And you had to, what was the ability that you had to just kind of stick with it, right? Because so many people give up after a year or 2 years or 3 years. You're saying 4 to 5 before you really hit your stride. Explain that process and kind of how you were thinking, what your thought process was, and what keep kind of getting up as you got knocked down and had some failures and lessons learned.
Yeah, so there was a couple things there. I think the main one, to be honest, I was a pizza delivery driver at the time. So I was trying to quit the pizza job to start the business. And so for me, nothing was worse than going back to the pizza job. So it didn't matter how bad the business was, how hard it was. That wasn't something I was going to do, is, quit and go back. So there was really no other alternative, which I think has been very helpful for me, in my journey, is just not having other options to quit on or cheat with. So that was big. And then another part too is growing up, I got into bodybuilding in high school. So I was an amateur competitive bodybuilder. In 2010, I won Junior Mr. Anchorage. And that for me really taught me that on my own effort, if I just kept going, I was going to see results. It's one of those things where, it doesn't matter if the team didn't play well, is how did I do? And so if I worked out and I ate right and I did all the things I knew I should do, regardless of what my doubts were, I was going to see some kind of change in the mirror. And I think that mindset definitely stuck with me in business, where I knew it doesn't matter how I feel today. If I just keep trekking, I'm going to see something change, and it's going to be better than what I have today.
And that's so incredibly powerful. I'm reviewing Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, and one of his pieces in there is consistency is more important than intensity, right? And if you are consistent, eventually you will see results. The issue that so many people run into is they don't know when those results are going to happen, right? So they give up, they stop doing it, even though, to your point, I'm going to get there. I'm going to see results. I just have to stay consistent, have to stay determined and driven in the endeavor. So that's awesome. That's a great lesson just to think about. And for those of you watching, listening, think about that. You will get results. You just have to be consistent. You have to put in the work on a daily basis. And that's so vitally important. So let's dive into personal finance a little bit. Entrepreneurs, business owners, right? Taxes, personal finance. What are a couple strategies that they can leverage to keep that money that they bring in the business, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me as a business owner, this is not stuff I learned right away. And I think that's the story of the average entrepreneur, is nobody teaches us the bookkeeping and the taxes. We usually learn that by accident because we have a bookkeeping problem or a really big tax bill. So we're kind of like, oh, shoot, I better go figure out what this is all about. So I would say, one of the biggest tips for entrepreneurs is, we've all heard of the cash flow quadrant, ESBI, employee, self-employed, business owner, investor. A lot of us, when we're entrepreneurs, we're jumping from employee to self-employed initially. Then we become business owners. And then finally, we hope to become investors. And so I would say the biggest thing is to take the mindset that you're already an investor. Okay, take the mindset that you're already an investor. And what I mean by that is, in the business, the numbers tell the story. If I'm already an investor, then I'm looking at things like cash flow. I'm looking at things on like, how much capital did I invest to get the business started and what is that yielding me? I'm looking at things like tax efficiencies. So if I can kind of wear that hat, if you will, and still run the business, operate it, but then take that time back to be the investor, really understand the numbers and study it. I think that sets the pace for the rest of the, tax planning and finances and asset building to be much easier.
And I like that approach because you're already projecting into the future where you ultimately want to get to, right? And then that's going to drive some of those actions, those daily disciplines that you need to eventually truly be that investor in your business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it makes it much easier to operate too. I when I started studying my numbers, and you may have seen this, and I imagine some of your listeners have, you can start to see some correlations. And so when X happens, Y and Z also happen. And I can take that data as the investor per se, and I can take that back to my business, and I can start to then use those numbers as a cause point. If I want more of Y and Z to happen, I need to start doing more of X. So it really allows me to be more predictive as well, which is another kind of just cherry on top, I would say.
Yeah, and I think being predictive is an awesome place to be, right? And so many small business owners, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs are reactive, and they don't really know what's coming down the pike, and that creates a lot of pain, a lot of frustration, a lot of stress, right? A lot of worry. So I always love when I coach clients on their morning routine. I say, put on that white lab coat. And that's very in line to what you're doing there, right? You've got X equals Y and Z, just do more of X to get more Y and Z. Put on that lab coat and try and take some informed decisions from the numbers you're seeing and the correlation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I love that piece. So taxes is a big piece. So what about taxes? Yes. How can business owners really lessen that tax bill and that impact on their business?
Yeah, so this is a big one. There's a lot you can do with taxes. Now, the important thing that I like to rely on as far as kind of my stable piece of information is the purpose of the tax code and where it came from. Okay. If we have this information, then the rest of it becomes much easier to kind of think with. So the tax code, literally it's law, right? We have federal laws that say what we've got to pay and what we don't have to pay. But the tax code itself, if you look at it with the actual code, not the case law and the notes, the actual code, it's almost 6,000 pages long. Okay, so that's a lot of information about taxes. Now, only about 0.05% of that is actually addressing the paying of income tax, which means 99.95% of it is addressing ways that we don't have to pay income tax. Okay, so that little thing there, when I first started studying the tax code, it made me look and it made me start to study, well, why is most of the tax code about not paying taxes? And that led me to then realizing who created the tax code and where do we get it from? And there's kind of two sides to this. The first side is obviously it's law. So it does get passed by our Congress and it gets put in as law. And so that means that part of it's going to be the government. And when they have, ways to reduce taxes, it's usually an incentive, right? So the government wants to incentivize certain investments, certain behavior. And if we do those things and we work with them, then they're going to reduce our taxes as a byproduct. Right. Now, the other half of it is good old fashioned lobbying. It's corporations that didn't want to pay taxes. They could afford to hire a lawyer. They could afford to hire a lobbyist. They can court a politician and then get their law or their bill passed in as law. And so there's a lot of that too, where companies will lobby stuff into the tax code. And a lot of it's written by the wealthy. The wealthy don't like paying taxes. And so there's a lot that's in there. And so that's important to understand. A lot of times we might call it loopholes, but it really is just open and available. If anyone wants to, they can go read the tax code and get the information to reduce the taxes. So that's kind of the first thing to understand. If you combine a knowledge of the tax code with good bookkeeping and good accounting, that's kind of the two sides of the equation that have to be there. And if I can combine those, then I like to tell my clients when we work with them, if we do this right, taxes can be optional. We just have to know what are our numbers and what are the applicable codes, and then have the documentation to back up that we're applying this code to our income. And this is why we're reducing our taxes. That's just very interesting, related to how many pages are in the tax code and then what applies to actually paying taxes versus avoiding taxes. That's very eye-opening. It's mind-blowing. Yeah.
I love statistics, and that's a stat I haven't heard before. And it's definitely mind-blowing. So we got into taxes a little bit. What about a business owner, solopreneur has some cash flow? How do they start to build personal wealth, right, outside of the business? Because you want to be diversified. You want to have other assets that produce cash or produce a return. How do business owners really build that personal wealth?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think with that question, as a business owner, we have to really address a topic that's not easy to confront. And it's the fact that every single business is on a countdown to failure. It is not going to exist forever, right? There's not a business in the world that's always been around. It's always a lifespan. So when we look at it from that standpoint, that means that there's a chance that lifespan is longer than us, and there's a chance that lifespan is shorter than us. We love our businesses, but we need to have a backup plan. We need to have something else out there. It doesn't mean that we take our foot off the gas and leave the business. It means that we start funneling money and assets into our personal wealth instead. So the biggest thing with this is cash flow. The business has to be profitable. It has to cash flow. Cash flow means that when I do income minus expense, there's a surplus left over. That surplus, I'm going to go through, some steps on reducing my taxes so I can keep the most of that surplus as I possibly can. And then I'm going to take that surplus and I'm going to start putting that aside to put into assets. Okay, now there's all sorts of assets you can invest in. I like to use a little 4 or 5 step formula. When I look at where do I put that cash flow for assets, I'm only going to put that into things that I like, that I understand, that fit me, and that fit my goals. Right. And the reason why I pick those 4 is investing actually means to clothe your capital. So literally we're putting clothes on our money. So I think about when I pick my own clothes, I only wear what I like. I only wear what I understand. I only wear what fits me, and I only wear what fits what I'm going to be using it for. And I would do the same thing with investments. And as long as I can follow that process and really be honest with myself about each of those key factors, that goes back to the consistency thing we addressed. If I keep doing that over time and I'm consistent, then that will turn into personal wealth. And what I've had personally happen is it actually grows my business more because it takes the stress off of me because I have passive income and I have, some other areas in my life producing that I can go into my business more as like an art and as a fun thing than, I used to call it going back into the salt mines, right? Like it's, it's this heavy, intense action. It doesn't have to be that if I'm okay, regardless of how the business does.
Yeah, stress is such a huge piece to the puzzle, right? And if you're strained from a cash flow perspective, you're constantly on that treadmill. You don't have predictability, which we talked about a little bit earlier. You can see how those can combine, and it's no wonder why entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, business owners, they struggle underneath that weight because it can be very great. So I love your point of having other assets, being diversified that are producing cash. So that releases that burden and that stress on day-to-day operating the business. Then you can even take a better approach and a more strategic approach rather than a short-term approach, right? Where you might be just trying to pay the bills day in, day out.
Yeah. And for me, Jeff, the biggest reason I got into business in the first place was A, to help people, but B, for personal freedom. And so with the business, personal freedom initially is the degree of I don't have a boss, I don't have a job, I don't have to punch the clock. And that's definitely true, but there's also a lot of other freedoms that go away when I become a business owner, because if I don't do it, no one will. Right. And so it's kind of, there's a little bit of a loss in freedom. So I think if we stay true to our original goal, which I think for most of us really is and was personal freedom, investing and building up those other assets, it really unlimits that. And it makes it to where we truly can achieve that original objective that sometimes we might get a little lost with. We get busy, things get hectic, and we kind of forget that the entire point of this thing was to have more freedom in life.
Yeah. And I find so many times that those business owners, and I've fallen into that trap as well, right? Not taking vacations, right? You don't have vacation time because you're in the business and you've lost that freedom that you thought would be so great because you don't have anything else from a diversification perspective. So definitely enjoy that piece to the puzzle. So Jerry, I know you had mentioned you wanted to give away the first chapter of your book. Where can people find that?
Yeah. So if you go to jerryfetta.com/free chapter, and I just wrote this a couple months back. This is my book, Blueprint of Financial Freedom. And this basically is a complete write-up of from the very beginning stages all the way up to becoming financially free via passive income. What does someone need to do? And so I'm giving away the first chapter to that. The reason I wrote this book is being in the financial industry, I would see, people that, they do the right things, but they do it in the wrong sequence or at the wrong time, which in life doesn't work. With finances, it's easier. It's harder to detect because there's more complexity and there's more, vocabulary that people don't always have. But it's kind of the equivalent of like if I'm eating, picking up the fork, chewing, and then putting the food in my mouth. It's mixed up and backwards. And it's not actually going to help me. So a lot of this is addressing when do I do this thing? If I'm setting up, an investment, when should I be doing that? When should I be doing my tax planning? When should I be looking at buying a house? So you can grab a free copy of that. I'm sure Jeff may have that in the show notes as well, but that's jerryfetta.com/free chapter.
Yeah, I will definitely include that in the show notes. Jerry, where else can people find you if they want to follow you and learn more about you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all the social platforms. Just search me, Jerry Fetta. That's Fetta. You can also just Google me and you'll see plenty there. So definitely different ways to connect. Whatever platform you like, we're probably on it.
Awesome. Jerry, I truly appreciate you being on the show.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing rest of your day. Rise, fight, love, repeat. Get after it. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Morning Fire for Entrepreneurs podcast. You now have the knowledge, but without action, knowledge is useless. Choose to act. Choose to step into your greatness and unlock that hero inside of you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review so more entrepreneurs can hear this message. If you absolutely love this podcast, which I hope you do, then share it up with someone you know who might see benefit from it. Become that beacon of change, and together we can impact the world.